Welcome to the I Am Capable podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gilbert, CEO, founder, and coach of Capable Consulting. I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD at the age of 8, and since then, I've navigated school, work, and leadership through a lens of neurodiversity, allowing me to create a set of strategies and insights to help neurodiverse professionals thrive. Tune in each episode for real-life scenarios, tools that bridge the gap between employees and employers. If you're a company leader, fostering inclusion, or a neurodiverse professional seeking support, then you are in the right place. Through this podcast, we'll grow together and explore what it means to have work be challenging and not hard. Let's break down the stigmas, boost productivity, and celebrate the strengths that help you feel empowered to say, I am capable. Welcome back to the I Am Capable podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gilbert, CEO, founder, and coach of Capable Consulting. And today, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity in adults. A lot of the times when I tell people what I do and I say that I only work with adults, they look at me like, I thought learning disabilities or ADHD or autism really only affected kids. And I said, well, in fact, kids grow up. Kids grow up and then they need resources that don't always exist in the workplace or at home. And when I talk about neurodiversity in adults, I'm talking about myself too. I have had neurodiversity show up in ways that I didn't really expect to be a challenge for me. I always give this example of when I had these brand new neighbors coming into town and I was so excited to meet them that I wanted to make cookies. And my husband looked at me and he said, "You need supervision." And I said, no, I'll be fine. And then he was like, "Okay, ready? Tablespoon, teaspoon. Do you know the difference?" I was like, "Sure don't. I constantly mix those up." Or I will do it in the wrong order. And I will tell you, if you do cooking or baking in the wrong order, let's just say there were 4 dozen cookies, then none of them were good. Anyway, I am so excited that today I am bringing on a team member in each episode. And today I am bringing my assistant, Samantha, here today, all the way from Chicago, virtually. We're so excited to have you here. She's been working for me for the last year or so and has gotten a whole introduction about neurodiversity in adults, and we've had so much fun learning together, and she is the most organized person I have ever met, and if you know, you need somebody who keeps you organized when you have learning disabilities or ADHD. So, Samantha, thank you so much for being here and holding me accountable and staying organized.
Thanks, Alex. I'm really happy to be here, and I actually have a few questions for you to get us started.
And funny how that works. I love it. All right, Samantha, let's go.
All right, perfect. Okay, Alex, what would you say are some of the biggest differences between how neurodiversity shows up in adults versus in kids?
That's a great question. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind immediately is executive functioning. Every time I think about the difference between kids and adults, everything in school is structured. Your day, it starts at the same time, it ends at the same time. Maybe you have different activities at the end of the week. When you're an adult, everything is on your own. You have to create a structure that makes sense for you. But when you've had a structure that's kind of there for you, developing it for yourself, knowing how you think, knowing how you learn, knowing what you need to make your day productive is really, really hard for you to do, especially if you have a disability that makes it hard to figure out what's your energy going to be like to make a schedule for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to back up a second, when we're saying neurodiversity in adults versus in kids, what does neurodiversity even refer to?
That's a great point. I should have said that to begin with, but here we are. That's where my distracted brain comes into this. Neurodiversity is really an all-encompassing term. It's talking about learning disabilities like dyslexia, which I have, or dyscalculia, which I also have. It's kind of like dyslexia for math. It could also talk about autism spectrum disorder. A lot of people associate neurodiversity with that, and ADHD. There are so many different categories of neurodevelopmentally thinking. See, even I get caught up in what I am saying. It's just a different term of how you think or learn.
Yeah, and I actually heard this stat that 15 to 20% of people are actually neurodivergent. What do you kind of think about that in your experience? Do you feel like that's accurate?
I definitely think that's accurate, and there's probably even more people who are actually not even diagnosed or diagnosed later in life, and so that stat I feel like has changed tremendously over the years, especially since COVID. People were actually getting therapy for the first time. Our understanding of what neurodiversity looks like in adults is very different than it is for kids. When I talk about neurodiversity in kids, people understand most of the time they think ADHD, they think of that kid in class who is driving the teacher nuts, hyperactive, but what that looks like in adulthood is very different. I'm someone who's hyperactive or has combined ADHD, which is when you are inattentive and hyperactive at the same time. So I could be spacing out in one moment, hyperactive in another. But hyperactive in an adult or hyperactive in a woman typically is someone who talks a lot. Isn't that funny what I do? I talk all the time. So that is why when we talk about what it looks like and how it changes, people might not have been diagnosed as kids, or they might be diagnosed as adults, or they might be misdiagnosed altogether as someone who might have been anxious or depressed or have some type of other comorbidity, which is actually showing up so much. I think the last stat that I read was about 80% of people who have a learning disability or ADHD or in this neurodiverse category really also struggle with their mental health. And if you think about it, you're holding on to so much. You might be masking if you hadn't been diagnosed, or you might be someone who was diagnosed like myself, who was trying to overcompensate constantly for a disability you don't want someone to blame you for, and thinking you might be stupid or less than or incapable of a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to fill everybody in a little bit, every episode we are going to be getting a question from our audience so that you can hear a challenge from their perspective and really see it through their eyes. Alex has not seen these before, we promise. So today's question is actually from Naomi, who is one of our other team members. She sent us a video, so let's see what she has to say.
Hi Alex, this is Naomi. So I work entirely remotely and my job doesn't subscribe to set hours during the day, and I'm given a deadline and have to submit it before then. Some background about me: I had undiagnosed ADHD in high school and actually got really good grades and did really well, but behind the scenes pulling constant all-nighters and engaging in these really toxic habits to get my work done. And I feel like I never really unlearned that. And now that I've graduated, I still engage in those habits, and I find myself 2 a.m. doing my work and not being able to stick to a schedule. So my question for you is, how do I unlearn these habits that have been instilled in me for so long to create new and healthy habits in my adulthood?
Thanks, Naomi, for asking that question. Honestly, I love this question, and it actually points to the fact that so many people who are in this neurodiverse category are incredibly bright. If you think about it, if you were not diagnosed until adulthood, you've now had to create systems that have worked for you over and over again, and then maybe explain it to other people, or find motivation when motivation did not exist whatsoever and still made things happen. I'm constantly impressed with people who are in this category of being later diagnosed. But it also speaks to my other point about the executive functioning that you need. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said to me, I needed to do something at the last minute to kind of light a fire under my ass to make something happen, well, I would be doing a lot of things right now with that money, because honestly, I would be spreading it all around the world to remind people what people with learning disabilities and ADHD have behind the scene in terms of their strengths. You want to be able to focus on what works for you, and that understanding in the school setting versus adulthood is very different. I would have you clock in with yourself. Check in, what are your high energy moments and what are your low energy moments? My guess is the tasks that you were leaving to the last minute are the ones that are really uninteresting to you, really hard. You might not know where to start on that. And so you're saving that for the end of the day when you have the least amount of energy. How can you check in with yourself and say, okay, it's 9 a.m., this is how I feel? If you start checking after a few weeks, you'll notice you probably have very similar highs and lows of when you might be able to do something called hyperfocus, where you are putting your head down and get everything done in a very short period of time. If you're also finding yourself in a scenario where the tasks that are constantly tripping you up are the ones that are really challenging because you don't know where to start, how can you work with the people that you work with, me in this scenario, and say, all right, what am I missing here? Here's what I know, and here's where I need something to be filled in. I often talk to people about having conversations with people that they are working with, and the first thing they tell me is, I don't know where to start. And that is the biggest phrase that just bites you in the ass every time, because it's also not true. You know so much. You know the full picture of your challenges, but you're stuck on one part. So how can you say, this is what I know, and this is where I'm needing some clarification, or maybe I'm trying to figure out what to prioritize. What do you need to help me prioritize here? It will change the dynamic of your conversation and also make you feel like you can be in a position to actually succeed and maybe take that task from the end of the day to the beginning of the day when you have more energy.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I know Naomi's question kind of highlights one major challenge that people with ADHD face when it comes to their workload and their schedule and all of that. What would you say are some other challenges for adults who are neurodiverse? And how does that kind of differ from what kids might be struggling with?
Lack of awareness, I think, is probably the biggest downfall of a lot of this, because you might hear what ADHD is because, again, the kid in the class who was disrupting every day and driving you crazy. Or you might have heard what autism is because there's a doctor on TV who has no social skills but is incredibly bright. Those are all very misleading and very misguided in terms of what ADHD learning disabilities look like in adulthood. People with these types of learning disabilities, this type of neurodiversity, are incredibly bright. And so we have different skill sets that we need to put out there, but we need a little bit of support to not only find our ways to communicate with people, but also change the stigma to remind people what you are capable of.
Yeah, and why is that stigma so harmful?
Because it's just flat out wrong. It's just flat out wrong, and it's also just so infuriating. There are so many scenarios in which I have been in work scenarios that weren't places where I could succeed. And the difference between being set up for success and being in a scenario where you are constantly set up to fail is a huge part of this issue. I use the example of me cooking for my neighbors and eating 4 dozen cookies. And I was thinking about my daughter's first birthday was recently, and I put together this entire event that was way too many people for a first birthday, if you ask me, but it was a great time. And we had, I had thought about all of these kids' food allergies. I had kids from all different age groups. I had goodie bags and entertainment and cold brew and other iced coffee, because if you know me, you know I live on coffee. And everyone said to me, this was such an amazing, thoughtful party. And one of my friends, who we've been to their home many times, she's an amazing cook, came in and was like, how did you do this? I could never do this. And I said, you know what? I could never cook. If you're in a scenario where you are put in a scenario where you are constantly the one who's cooking, the one who's creating the menu, the one who is shepherding everything for everyone's needs in that, but it's not your skill set, you are doing something that is constantly hard versus doing something that is challenging. For me, it was a challenge to be able to bring in everybody from all different age groups to be entertained, to have food that was fun for them, that they would have a great time and feel like this was a place they wanted to be. That was a challenge for me and something that I could do that would be successful. If you are in an environment and doing things that are hard instead of challenging, you're never going to feel successful. And that's constantly what people are in the scenario to do. They are constantly put in job roles overcompensating for things they lack, rather than being put in scenarios where they're spending more time doing the things that they're good at. So we're almost playing to that stereotype of not being very smart or not being very good at our job because we're in roles that we're overcompensating for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just to kind of take us back to Naomi's question, you've worked with a lot of companies. What is it like for the team or the company that neurodiverse individuals may be working with when someone is, relying on those kinds of toxic work habits, having those off hours? How does that affect, collaboration, the workflow overall, deadlines, etc.?
Oh, it is so frustrating. I have been on the other end of that in my own companies. Not currently. I'm not saying that about working with Naomi. I'm saying that in companies that I've worked with in the past, it is really frustrating to be on the bottleneck end of it. You have deadlines. You have things that you need to do. And it almost feels like you might be babysitting somebody who has, other skills that you're lacking. And I would say to that, let's tweak this. Let's stop thinking about this in terms of where the negative comes in, because everybody has skills that they are naturally good at, and everybody has skills that they need support on. And you might be an expert on one end, and they might be the expert on the other end. You've hired them to do a job that you know they can do well, so know that you have hired somebody that is quality in that scenario. I use this in every workshop I have ever done. I use this in every coaching, with every coaching client I've ever worked with too. And that is to ask, what is your favorite or least favorite game? And the reason I ask this is because it tells me everything I need to know about how you think, learn, organize, where you get that dopamine fix, where is your drive. You're going to play things that you're naturally good at. You're going to lean into things that you can do well all the time. And you're going to avoid the things that you like the least and that are most annoying to you. If you start having conversations and just asking your employees, what does that look like for them? You'll notice the characteristics that are coming up. My guess is the employee who is struggling and giving you that bottlenecking scenario might not be great at the games that have over-structured, places, but they might be really amazing at the creativity game, and that's where you need the support. So how can we talk about this in a way that is supportive to what you both need instead of constantly being frustrated as to what comes next? I think that it also makes it possible for both people to be responsible for what your needs are and how we can communicate that effectively and stop being the bottleneck. If my guess is the person who is really struggling to get things in on time knows that you are waiting for them constantly and they're worried about losing their job. So tackle it head on in a way that doesn't make them feel like they are being approached in a you're going to get fired scenario, but what are some things that you can do to make this easier for them?
So something I've heard you talk about a ton since working with you is DEI. So can you share a little bit about how all of this that we're talking about today regarding neurodiversity in adults, how does all of that fit into the broader DEI conversation?
That's a great question. DEI is a very all-encompassing term to talk about diversity. And a lot of the times it is really easy for us to ignore neurodiversity because you don't see it. And I've talked about this, that years ago I had reconstructive ankle surgery, and I was walking in New York City and I was in a walking boot after what felt like months of me not being able to walk at all. And this dad was standing behind me talking to his daughter, and she was asking a ton of questions like, do you think she needs help? Why is she wearing a walking boot? Like, what is going on? And he was politely answering in all these different ways. But you could see it. You could see that I was physically struggling. And companies really struggle to find a way to bring inclusivity to their workplace because no one's talking about it, and because it's easy to hide, it's easy to mask, it is easy to ignore because you don't see it. And I've talked about how when we're talking about DEI, it's not just about neurodiversity, it's not just about inclusion in general. We're trying to make a space that is accessible to everyone. So think if you have a ramp to your front door, it's accessible to the person who is in a walker, a wheelchair, a parent with a stroller, or even the able-bodied person who is able to walk through your door. So how can we talk about diversity in how people think? Because everyone is bringing something to the table that makes our companies excel beyond belief. And that is what I want you to be able to think about too. Innovation, a lot of the times, comes from how people think differently and outside of the box. Productivity comes from people who are constantly creating new pathways for themselves to learn for themselves and teach others. There are so many skill sets that people who are in this category can help you with if you bring them to the table. And talking about neurodiversity in this DEI space gives you a place to do that.
Alex, I know your ultimate goal with this podcast is to really bridge the gap between the employee or the individual and the employer, the company, and the team that the individual is working with. So we've kind of talked about this from both perspectives. Let's really try to bridge the gap here. What can we do to make sure that we are supporting both the individual and the company?
It is definitely my goal. And I am really looking to give place for conversations to happen. Part of what happens when you are having conversations is you build a different set of empathy, you build a different set of education. And when I work with companies, I've had 100% retention rate in terms of companies who are looking to create new pathways for success, not just for their employees who are neurodiverse, but really everybody. Because when everyone feels seen, supported, they feel successful, they have the language to be able to ask what their needs are. It's also about providing resources that are going to be available for everybody. So many companies are investing heavily in AI. So what are you doing to help use AI within your system? Are you recording your meetings with summaries? Are you sending out agendas before your meetings? Are you providing maybe noise canceling headphones or loop headphones for noise reduction if you're physically in a different space? Are you providing different technology in terms of having things like Speechify, which read all of your different texts, or Grammarly, that checks your grammar and makes sure that you're actually sending the attachment that you mean to attach? This type of technology is going to be available for everybody and also helpful for everybody, but it leans less on the person who has the disability to then advocate for themselves to say, I need different types of tools. These tools make everyone more productive. And honestly, some of the companies that I have worked with who have come back to me have said, not only was it helpful to start with this educational piece and really understand what neurodiversity looks like in adults, but how they can identify some of the struggles that their team were having. And we've now broken it down into managerial one-on-one coaching for some of their clients and some of their employees to really better their skills in a different way, because we have brought a more inclusive environment to their workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all such great points and takeaways that our audience can really process and see how they can improve things on their end. And I know just personally, I would love to hear some examples of how our audience takes this advice and uses it. So would always encourage everybody to reach out to us, right? How can they do that?
Yes, Samantha, that's great. They can always find us at I Am Capable on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or find us on YouTube where they can watch this episode and just comment and let us know what tools are you actually using, and maybe you might even tell me tools that I don't know about. There is so much technology, so many tools that are coming out every day. I feel like my clients are constantly telling me about, have you checked out this one or that one? I'm like, that's fun. Then I go down a rabbit hole because, well, I have ADHD. So I would love to know what you're using and what has been helpful from this episode.
Absolutely. And just to completely switch gears here, I have a few rapid fire questions that I would love to go through with you so that our audience can get to know you a little bit better.
All right, here we go.
Okay, first up, if your brain had a theme song, what would it be?
If my brain had a theme song, my daughter is really obsessed with Beauty and the Beast. Like, utterly obsessed. So I think Tale as Old as Time is playing all the time, actually to the point where I dropped her off at daycare the other day and I was like, great, I can listen to my own song. And then I turned on the next station and it was Celine Dion singing Tale as Old as Time. So I think that one is the one that's singing in my head at all times right now.
Definitely. All right, number 2, what sports teams do you root for?
I am a lovable loser. I have literally never won anything in my life. So I'm a Mets fan, Jets fan, Knicks fan, Islander fan, Hoosier fan. Man, my Mets, they're killing me right now. But I am happiest when at a baseball game and have my big Mets hat on. And usually if they're winning, I'm much happier.
All right, and last up, what is one book or show or movie that you can just rewatch over and over and over again?
I have been watching Friends. I've been literally watching Friends since I think I was in 6th grade. There's this whole thing about when you are anxious, you constantly rewatch things because it gives you that little support. So Friends has been the theme song and the theme of my life forever. I could do full scripts by heart. So I love Friends. I'll go with that one.
Alex, this has been so great and so much fun. Thank you for having me on today.
All right, thanks, Samantha. I am always so grateful for someone who is keeping me organized all the time, not just for this podcast, but thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for watching. I hope you learned a little bit more about neurodiversity in adults, and if you are someone who has a learning disability or ADHD and struggling in your career and looking for some one-on-one help, or you're a company and trying to find ways to be more inclusive, that's what I'm here for. So check out capableconsulting.com. You can also reach out to us at podcast@capableconsulting.com and follow us for more social media updates at I Am Capable. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, so many different places. I'm sure you can find me at I Am Capable. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you find your favorite shows. And I'll tune in for next episode. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the I Am Capable podcast. My mission is to make sure that with the right strategies, neurodiverse employees and their companies are able to increase productivity, improve communication, and create an environment where everyone feels valued. Through one-on-one coaching, I help neurodiverse professionals gain clarity, build confidence, and develop personalized tools to succeed at work. For companies, Capable Consulting offers custom workshops and trainings designed to help your teams better understand and support a dynamic, neurodiverse workforce. Whether you are navigating career shifts, college transitions, or you are looking for community through the ADHD Lounge, I'm here to help. Let's build a workplace where everyone can thrive. Visit capableconsulting.com to learn more and connect with me today.